Why are you interested in invasive species management and biodiversity?
Well, protecting the environment has always been very important for me. Landscape beauty, water, food, and genetic biodiversity are basically providing our basic needs. They provide ecosystem services that are very important to humankind.
How do invasive species come into play in relation to protecting the environment?
Well, invasive species basically have been identified at a global scale as a second or third threat to biodiversity after habitat loss. So this is a major environmental issue that people are not necessarily aware of. So tackling the invasive species challenge is part of addressing the issue around biodiversity decline, and it is part of the solution to protect humankind, our children, our biodiversity, and the ecosystem services on which we all rely upon to live.
And would you say that we have a duty to our children and to future generations to ensure that we actually do this?
Yeah, so not only I think that for me it's very natural to protect biodiversity, but it's also part of a ethical duty that we have the ethical duty to protect our natural environment, because we don't want to leave our children in a polluted environment. We don't want to end up in that world where we would have to eat synthetic food.
Really? You think it could get to that degree where we'd have to eat synthetic food?
Maybe in the near future, maybe.
Have you got any interests that sort of promote your inner feelings about protecting the environment?
Well, I come from Strasbourg in France. This is my cultural heritage, and this place has inherited from the German culture and the idea that you have to protect your own environment, that this is very important for humankind. As a French citizen as well, food is very important to me, so it's part of a very strong cultural heritage. So it's more than that. And I am very sensitive to landscape beauty. When I was a kid, I used to go and walk and ski in the French Alps. And here in Australia, I'm very sensitive to the beauty of areas such as Dorrigo or Bellingen in the northern tablelands in northern New South Wales. So I think that this is a matter of protecting our natural heritage as well.
And it sounds like our living standards as well. I mean, if it seems to me like it's a no-brainer that we do this.
Absolutely.
That we implement things.
Absolutely. And Australia is one of the few countries with a mega biodiversity. So Australia is a very unique country in that it has a very rich biodiversity, and it needs to be protected. With climate change and an ever-increasing world population, the invasive species biodiversity is increasingly under threat. So tackling the invasive species challenge is about trying to find a solution to protect humankind. Basically, that's what it means.
Wow, so this really is important stuff that we need to be getting our head around sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
And so how has climate change then impacted upon invasive species?
It modifies the way invasive species spread in the natural environment, in natural ecosystems. So climate change does have an impact upon invasive species patterns and trends.
So what are invasive species?
It is a highly complex challenge, because what might be perceived as an invasive species from a farmer point of view might not be the case from a conservationist point of view. And somebody who is not familiar with the invasive species challenge may not be aware of the fact that a beautiful plant may be invasive and may threaten our natural ecosystems and threaten our food security. So invasive species challenge encompasses major perception issues.
So you talked a little bit about animals being invasive species, but you just mentioned as well that plants can also be invasive species. Have you got any examples of plants that, you know, may be considered to be invasive in Australia?
Absolutely. In Australia, we've got invasive plants that destroy our natural ecosystems and farmlands, and those plants compete for sunlight, nutrients, and space, and they also impact upon our food security. So just to give you a bit of an example, one of the worst weeds of national significance here in Australia is African feathergrass, and as well as alligator weed in New South Wales. Those types of plants compete with nutrients, light and space, and threaten our food security.
And one would assume also that that's going to be relevant just to the mum and dad gardeners out there who are going to be, you know, no doubt battling with their weeds constantly. So would that be an example of an invasive species too, weeds in our garden?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very we know the expression in Australia, weeds jumping the fence. That's a perfect example. Actually, gardeners have to weed out on a regular basis.
And obviously, a lot of gardeners will use chemicals, for example, on their weeds to try and eradicate them. Would you suggest from a conservationist point of view that that is a good way of going?
Well, there are different theories. If you look at theories promoting agroecology, some scientists argue that you don't need to use chemicals to control weeds. Weeds are a sign that show that your soil is sick, has got a disease. So you need to protect the soil differently by using other means than chemicals.
Okay, so people out on the street who don't necessarily know anything about conservation, the key thing that they can do in their own properties, in their own gardens, well, what would that be? What would be the key thing that people could do?
Well, there are different ways to address weeds. Either you buy agricultural chemicals, or you want to go in a more organic way and try to find a more sustainable way to protect your soil and eradicate weeds. Okay. So different theories, different point of views, which raise key even political challenges, political conflicts in that area, because people have different ways of addressing the same challenge.
So there's no one way of fixing all of these problems. Is that what you're suggesting?
The invasive species challenge is a complex issue, obviously, and there is no such a thing as an easy solution.
So where do invasive species actually come from?
Well, invasive species can be imported unintentionally, but a lot of invasive species have been introduced intentionally into Australia. So the perfect example is the story about how cane toads have been imported in the early 30s in Australia to fight against a certain type of beetle that was affecting sugar cane crops in Queensland. So in that example, cane toads were imported as biological control agents to control a certain type of plant disease. And but the problem is that cane toads became invasive, and since then they have spread throughout the country in many parts in Australia, and have impacted natural ecosystems and native species. So this is a perfect example to illustrate that what can happen when you play with nature, what can be wrong when you import a new species into the country. How can you balance the benefits, the risks, again, the benefits of introducing new species with commercial value into the country. So this is why you do need to have strong risk management frameworks in place to plan for the worst case scenario. Particularly in that context where we're increasingly using new technologies to create new living organisms using synthetic biology. So basically with synthetic biology, you can create new living organisms that could potentially go wild and So you need to have strong risk management frameworks in place to be able to plan for the worst case scenario.
Because otherwise, sounds to me like the solution can be worse than the problem in the first place if you don't do that.
Absolutely. What is seen as a solution at a certain point of time can become a major environmental disaster. So that is then to be supported by taxpayers and the whole community, not only nationally, but globally.
If you could just tell me a little bit about the idea of biosafety and introducing biosafety.
The reason why it's important to control and manage the invasive species risk is because the importation of new invasive species can bring new plant and human diseases into the country. At the moment, we don't have rabies in Australia. This is why having strong biosecurity systems is very important to protect not only plant health, but as well as human health and biodiversity. And we need to have strong backup plans to plan for the worst. And it is also important for Australia to fulfill its international legal obligations, to implement conventions that intend to protect biodiversity, but as well as protect human and plant health.
So what you're suggesting is we need a number of different people from different specialities to come together and plan about how we can manage these threats most effectively?
Absolutely. The invasive species challenge, as many other environmental problems, a highly complex challenge, and you need to bring different perspectives from different disciplines. You need to bring different knowledge systems together, including Western science as well as traditional knowledge systems together, and try to improve invasive species management.
And has that started happening already? Are people coming together to talk about these issues, different disciplines?
Yes, absolutely. This is one key aspects that we've been working on as part of Program 4 of the Invasive Animal CRC, that intends to improve invasive species management by increasing community engagement on those issues.
Because it seems to me the more the community knows about these issues, the more they're going to really be able to understand the risks involved and also the benefits in making sure you have a decent risk management plan.
Absolutely
available.
Community engagement is a risk management strategy to address environmental risks. If communities throughout Australia are aware of what invasive species are, they're in a better position to control those potentially this risk.
It seems to me this is a very sort of complex challenge for the community. So both for scientists, for legal people, for everyone, it's a very complex challenge. Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because environmental problems, as with any other environmental problems, the invasive species challenge raises political conflicts. People have different views, different opinions on how to manage invasive species. There are key ethical issues as well as to how we should kill or not invasive animals. So it cuts across a wide range of political and debatable issues.
Elodie, if you can just tell me a little bit about why this is a matter of national security as well.
Well, it's about protecting biodiversity. It's about protecting the ecosystem services that we all rely upon to eat, to breathe. This is about protecting plant health. This is about protecting humankind. And this is also about protecting the health
our
and
future.
Safety, protecting our future.
And our children's future.
And our well-being as well.
And so when people travel, often you'll get like a funny card or something that you need to fill in. Can you tell me a little bit about, is that just, people asking questions that are totally irrelevant, or is there actually a reason for those questions?
I like giving this example to people to explain what my research is about. whenever you fly back to Australia, you have to fill that incoming passenger card. And on this card, you're being asked a couple of questions, such as have you been overseas? Have you been on a farm overseas? And when you think about those questions, it's about asking you as to whether you might be importing new invasive species, invasive animals, or invasive plants into the country. So basically, the Australian government doesn't want you to bring any potentially new diseases into the country. So when you answer those questions, it's about protecting human health and plant health as well. I don't know whether you remember the big media coverage that followed the story about Johnny Depp wanting to bring his dogs into Australia. Well, that was a matter of national security. It's about protecting our natural environment and protecting our food security. You don't want to have rabies in Australia. So this is a serious issue.
So it wasn't just sort of the government trying to be annoying and with Johnny Depp. It was actually something that was of national significance to our future health.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that those things needs to be taken seriously. It's about protecting. It is about protecting human and plant health, and the invasive species challenge is people are not necessarily aware of this key challenge, but it's definitely one of the second or third threats to biodiversity at the moment around the world.
So it's not just as around the world.
It's nationally, but also as around the world.
Right, okay. So just can be bringing in some fluffy dogs, which may seem very innocent and who cares, is actually, and I mean, when we're all travelling as well, we need to be thinking, I would have assumed, about these issues. That this is really one of the best things we can do to really safeguard our future.
Absolutely. And people are increasingly traveling those days, which is great. But the risk associated with increasing traveling is that you might be carrying out new diseases and you can import them into another country. So that's a significant risk.
Are the issues relating to invasive species also relevant overseas?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just give you an example. When I went back to France a couple of years ago, my mom has got a beautiful garden, which was destroyed by a certain species of caterpillar called the chenille processionnaire. And the chenille processionnaire destroys beautiful pine forests at the moment in the south of France next to the Spanish border. This type of caterpillar eats pine needles, and as a result it dramatically increases the risk of fire during summertime. So this is a key environmental risk at the moment. In Europe, the foot and mouth disease in 2001 in the United Kingdom had severe economic, social and environmental impacts upon the British agriculture, for example.
What is the best way forward in terms of managing invasive species?
Well, invasive species is a highly complex challenge, as I've already highlighted to you earlier. So there is no easy solution that you can come up with, but it's a matter of having all the different parties involved to discuss potential areas for improvement, how to improve and how to create effective risk management frameworks to address this key environmental challenge. So everybody should be involved in that discussion, including traditional owners. Aboriginal people have an amazing knowledge of ecosystems and how to manage environmental risks. We need to have researchers, public authorities, policymakers, financial investors, insurers. So it is very important to bring people all together on those issues to try to come up with new solutions and create effective risk management frameworks.
And would you say that there is enough money being invested into this area at the moment?
So that's why time and resources are needed to spend time to fund new research and see how we can address collectively this this issue.
So you've talked a lot about the challenges and how all the stakeholders need to come together. Can you tell me a little bit about your own research in this area in relation to actually forwarding some of these or trying to solve some of these complex issues?
Well, in my PhD research, I looked into how we could create stronger risk management frameworks to address invasive species management. I use key concepts such as the concept of risk, the concept of co-regulation, smart responsive regulation, among other things. And I used a specific case study around the use of second generation biofuel crops to illustrate the type and the extent of the type of legal innovations that could be at least theoretically possible to improve invasive species management.
So if you can tell us a little bit more about the regulations and the type or mode of regulation that you recommended in your PhD thesis and your subsequent research.
So given the complexity of the invasive species challenge, I designed an approach recommending a policy mix, the use of I designed a multi-targeted intervention using different risk-based instruments to tackle the invasive species risk. Those instruments would have to involve different key stakeholders such as insurers, financial investors, landowners. So it would have to involve different stakeholders.
Okay, so you're essentially saying that we need to be looking at this from a number of different perspectives, and the community needs to be coming together to work out a solution to this very, very complex but very important problem.
Absolutely, yes.
Because if we don't, if we sit back and do nothing, okay, what will happen in your best guess?
I mean, the current trend suggests that biodiversity is increasingly under pressure. So it means that it's going to increase the pressure that human beings are under. And in the long terms, it means that biodiversity decline is going to be conducive to threaten our food security. So if we don't act now, it's likely that the human species will be under threat.
So it's incredibly important.
It is incredibly important.